Hi guys, welcome back to Otto's Garage. Okay, so we're going to have a quick look at that balancer shaft delete kit today and just see how that fits into the engine block. I've done quite a comprehensive video on that because basically there's not a lot of information on the YouTube about that at all. So at least hopefully this will help a few of you guys out that are looking to fit one of these kits. The balancer shaft itself is located in this part of the engine block. And basically you have one fitted in here and you have a second one in here. Now the actual shaft itself is this puppy here, so it's kind of designed to act like a counterweight, which is why it's that shape, and it's obviously all factory balance, which are what these little holes are here, so they can obviously get the weight exactly right. But like we said before, fitting that involves an extra belt and a couple of pulleys. So you'd have a pulley on each of these and you've got a belt driven off the crankshaft. So you've got one belt doing that, and then you have a second belt which drives all of the cam shafts over the top of the head there. But in any event, the balancer shafts are coming out, or they have come out, and we've got the kit which replaces them, and that comprises of a couple of parts. So you basically get the front bearing idler, which bolts over here, so that's going to be bolted on something like that, and then that will have a bearing fitted to it which the cam belt actually runs against. The other part of the kit, which some say isn't required, but I think it's probably not a bad idea, is this little doohickey here. Now basically what that does is that replicates this center bearing, and obviously the center bearing has got an oil way which feeds oil onto that. So if you take out the balancer shaft, technically you've got a low pressure oil zone, you know, it can just squirt free there, there's no pressure behind that. So what that part there does is that sits inside here and replicates that bearing, and therefore stops the oil coming out. So it maintains oil pressure in the rest of the bearings, which isn't a bad thing at all. However, the issue that you've got is that it is located right the way down there in the bowels of the engine. So how do we get to it? There are two issues. Number one, you've obviously got to get out the bearing, and you can see that down in the middle there. That's the shiny ring that you can see halfway down the engine. So that bearing there, the kind of the seat of the bearing, if you like, has got to be drifted out, and to get and do that you need obviously a reasonably long bolt, which is the best way I found to do it. So what I basically did was I got a long bolt, voila, and that is obviously long enough that it'll reach down to that zone there. So basically the easiest thing to do is to just basically mount the bolt onto the new bearing replacement, or the blank, or whatever you want to call it, and then you can feed that down straight into the engine all the way down there, and it'll sit against that bearing race, and then when you give it a bit of a drift, it will basically push in as the bearing race comes out. So I'm going to have a look at that and we'll see just how we get on. Okay, so there it is, all offered up, and we've basically put the bolt and through on the same thread all the way down. So you can kind of feel it when you enter the hole, if you like. You can feel where it locates against that race, and then you can give it a bit of a drift. And this side here actually is a little bit easier because you can actually see where it is down there through your oil vent hole in that position. So that's where it's going to go. So what we're going to do, the good thing as well is that it has got a taper on it, so both the bearing is tapered and that new blank is tapered as well. I'll just get in focus for me. So it will kind of self-locate, and then all we need to do down this end is give this a drift and it should drive it through. So I'm just going to do that now. Okay, so we've got that located in that position. We should just be able to give it a bit of a tap, and hopefully that's it. I can feel it moving straight away. And there, you can feel that change of tone. That means that she's basically got to the seat. So it's just drifted that bearing out as it's come through there. And then basically what I can do is I can put a socket on here if I need to pull it back out again if we do have anything stuck and we can't get that other part of the bearing out. But basically that's those fitted in there, so they should be all right. I just need to get the old bearing out from the other end. Okay, what we've done here is I've just made up a puller out of a socket and an old nut, etc., onto that original bar. So what's happened is that when we've drifted the blanking piece in, it's obviously pushed the bearing seat out. So the bearing seat is sitting just across this side here, but it hasn't come all the way out. So I need to pull out the blank again using this as a puller. And then basically what it means is that we can just drift out the rest of that bearing, and then we'll push it back in again. All done. Right, I've got the top one out, so I'm just going to do the same on this bottom one, and it really did come out quite simply. So it's just a matter of getting a socket on there, and you have got the bonus here that you can actually see down and see what's occurring, but it just come out very easily. It's not a horrendously seized fit that you'd get. And then basically we just lift around, kaboosh, job's a good one. With the engine inverted, that's a fancy word for a stick upside down. You can see that bearing there which we've pushed out. So basically it's pushed through from this side and the bearing seat is just in that position. That's great on this bottom one, you can get at it dead easily, but obviously on the top shaft it's much harder, you know, you can't really get at it. So I'm just going to basically try and see if I can get that one out of there. Right, so the drift that we're going to use just to push that bearing out a little bit, I've basically just got a standard 1/2 inch drive, non-swiveling extension bar, and I've got that's a 30mm socket, which is just external dimension, OD, whatever you want to say, just slightly less than the bearing, which is going to go into, on the caliper gauge it comes out as a 40mm bearing, and this is just like literally minusculely less than that. So it does, when it goes through, you can see down there it nicely goes in there, and it's not jamming, it's free, which is what you want. You don't want to get the bloody socket stuck in there. So if we just give that a little tap on the end, it should just move that bearing out, and I'll go to the other side so you can see it. Bingo, out she comes. You probably just have to give it another tap just as it goes through that second hole, and then the end one is considerably bigger, so it just falls out. But this is the little beast that we've basically removed. So it's just basically a little race the holes in it so it can get some oil through to the bearing. That's all it does. So the new part, which we took out, which replicates that, obviously that's got no holes in it, and that seals up all of that supposed leakage and low pressure zone, if you like. So that should hopefully maintain the pressure in the block for the oil. The next process then really is just a matter of refitting the blank, and you can see that going through into where the centre bearing was. That is quite a nice snug fit, but what we'll do is we'll just give that a little tap, and you can see it. Bingo, she's in. So all that's going to need now is there's another plate which goes on the other side of that bung, and then basically that gets tightened up so it can't fall out again basically afterwards. Right, so just got to do the other side and then we're done. A couple more items we've got in the kit are what looks like core plugs, but basically these, I'll just get you the other size one. These are going to go off, these are the blanks, so they go basically where the old shaft used to come out. So you've got one there, you've got one down the bottom there, and then you've got corresponding ones at the other end. So there's one that's going to go in here as well, and one on the other side. So that's what those 4 guys do. These little ones here are basically the side, kind of like oil feed core plug, which goes in the side there. And then there's another one, if I can get my feet around it, there's another one down here as well. So I'm going to take those out before we put the actual blanking pieces in. So I might have to get the drill in there, just get those out, pop them out. And then the last item, which is pretty critical, is this little blanking grub screw. So that is going to go, obviously when we've blanked this hole off here, there's an oil feed here, just on the side, which would normally feed into where the balancer shaft was. So that has got to be blanked off. The lower one, which has the pulley system on it, that's all obviously covered over anyway on there. But yeah, we need to just blank this out. And what we have to do there is we're going to have to tap that out, drop a tap down it, and then we can wind the grub screw in there to blank that off. I've just tapped that out. So what you do need to do is just get a, if you've got a 6.5mm, should be 6.7, but I've got a 6.5mm drill bit. I'll just pass that down there. It did do it okay, and basically so we drilled her out and then we've tapped it, and now the grub screw will go back in there when we actually put all the motor together. So that's that bit done. One other thing that I did fail to mention is that is a M8 by 125 thread, so that's the kind of tap that you need to get that in there. The other thing I've been having a look at is the rear exhaust. So you saw before that we had this Group A stainless system. It's actually a 76mm OD, and it was running a little bit short on length, mainly because of the boot. But what I've done there is I've just mocked up the rear silencer in its kind of final resting place, and then we kind of need to work forward from there to try and find a solution for connecting the pipes up where they go over the top of the axle. Now this is kind of the issue that we've got. So basically you can see where the end of the silencer pipe is up here, and that's the pipe that comes up over the top of the back axle. So I've kind of worked out that it's about 200mm short, so we need to get a little extension piece which will slot over one end of those pipes and then into the other end of it. So that should hopefully solve that issue, but it is a bit of a tricky one to try and get it all to line up. There's a lot going on there. I put the sharp end of the exhaust, so this is the manifold which bolts onto the turbo. Now before we had that little down pipe there, so this is like a 90°. So one end went onto the turbo, the other went on to the exhaust system. On this stainless system, they basically do away with the downpipe bend, so now you've got it all incorporated into the system itself. However, what I've found is that of course we've got a different kind of flange here. I think this goes onto a Evo 1 or later turbo, which is different to the one that I've got on the 8 valve. And basically we're going to have to get an adapter so that the end plate on the exhaust system is the same as this downpipe with the four bolts on it. So that's going to need a bit of modification work, but I've got a man who can do that, and I'm just going to give Ian Noden Fabrications a shout out, because they've done a few bits and bobs on the car, including the lights, and Noddy, as we call him, is going to give us a hand with sorting this exhaust system out. Cheers, Nod. It's time for a little bit of housekeeping. So with any project like this, after a certain time the workbench gets to be a bit of a state. So we're going to get this all cleaned up and tidied, because at the end of the day we have got an engine to build, and that needs to be a nice clean area. So let's get stuck into it. Well, that's better. We've now got ourselves a nice clear and clean work surface. Hard to keep on top of stuff like that, but it's got to be done when you come to doing an engine. So I think that's going to be our main area there. It's nice bit of space, nice bit of light. Happy days. Cranks. Now, we're not talking about that hilarious Scottish duo that you might see down at the Panto. This is the actual shaft we're after now. So basically, there she is, the crankshaft. The part that's fixed on the front here is the oil pump, and there's a little pulley which is the I think that's the cam pulley. I think that's the cam pulley. Anyway, it's a pulley, and we have got to get that off before we can get rid of the old oil pump to replace it with the new one. And you might think that, oh, you know, it'll be all right, we'll just leave the old one on there. But to be fair, you're going to all this work. That is the one element that is going to knacker the engine if it ain't running right. So you've got to have decent oil pressure. So basically, the old one's going out and the new one's coming in. There's a bracket here I've got to take off, and then we'll try and get this this pulled off the end of the crank. I've got a universal puller kit, which is a great piece of kit, don't get me wrong, that's really good. However, because we've got the oil pump on, I can't get the, you know, the kind of, I don't know what the hell they call it, this piece here that goes behind, normally go behind the item you're pulling off, misses. I can't get it in behind there, basically, so what I've had to do is make up a pull of my own. So I've just put a loose bolt in the end, that's not threaded at all, that's just sitting in the hole, so that's smaller than the left-hand threaded crank bolt. And then we've got a couple of M8 bolts that run through. This actually is a brake wind back tool. I've just drilled a couple of holes in there to correspond to the position for the M8 bolts, and I'm going to give that a wind and just see whether that will actually pull off our good friend on the end of the crank. Okay, now necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention, and I can tell you now that has worked. So I'm quite impressed with that. Cool. Right, so that's all loose. And now you can see the water pump, and that should just slide off. And happy days, there she is. So I have no idea whether that's a serviceable part or not. I will ask on the group, somebody might want to buy that and put new valves in it, I don't know. But there we have ourselves one of the famous crankies. Good news. At the rear end, so this is the flywheel end of the engine, you've got a seal which goes over the back of the crank, and then obviously this plate bolts onto the block as well. I want to give that a bit of a buff up, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the old seal. I've got a new seal for this. Keep the old seal in there just while we buff it up, and that'll protect this edge around here. Then we can pop the seal out and put the new one in. So I'll just give that a quick go over on the not on the grinding wheel, that's too severe. We'll just go around it on the fixed wheel on this machine here. So we'll give that a bit of a go over and see what she looks like afterwards. Well, that looks a bit better. So I've just taken off the worst of the outer corrosion there. I've just gone over it and given it a very light kiss across that edge, because it's a gasket edge, and the same on the back there, because you don't want to put any nicks or anything in that steel. So you've got to be quite careful there that you don't end up gouging the plate and then compromising the gasket seal. But I'm going to leave that old seal in there while we paint it. That again will keep the paint out of that return area where the seal seats, and then yeah, we'll pop that out after she's dry, put the new one in. Right, something else that I've been doing is a bit of cleaning up for brackets that we need to get on bolted onto the engine, so they all need a bit of clean off ready for paint. And this is what we've got so far. So these are kind of like various bits of inlet manifold, bracketry, bit of turbo housing and oil return pipes, stuff like that. That's the oil breather and return little module that goes on the side of the engine there. And then there's a turbo feed pipe as well, which could do with a nice bit of paint on that. So all I've done with those is just get over those with the wire wheel again, just take the worst off. And then I also got a linishing disc out on the grinder as well, and just took some of the pitting out on some of these items. So they need a bit of paint on them, and then we can get them hung up ready to dry. So there's a couple of the parts which we've sprayed up, and again I've used the VHT paint on those. Obviously that turbo pipe, that oil field one, there's going to be a bit of heat going into there, and possibly the same with this one. This is the vent off the engine, and then I've just given that a bit of a clean up on the end, so that looks quite tidy now. Although you're not going to see it, I know it's there, and if I know it's there, I want it to look right. So those two will be on show though. I'm sure that somebody's going to have a good look at those bits. So that's those sprayed up, so they need to dry off, and then we can put them on one side ready for fitting onto the engine block. Right, a couple more parts done there. So that's obviously the, well, I say obviously, it depends whether you know what they are, but they are actually the cam belt pulleys. And like I said before, these are the standard ones. I'm not going to be putting on like vernier pulleys or anything like that at the moment. Let's just get the engine going, and let's get it back in the car and see what she's like, and then we can have a fiddle around with it another day. And then we've just basically sprayed up some of the bracketry and pipes that I cleaned up earlier. So they are all going to have to dry off now, and then we can get them popped on another day. Good stuff. And with that, I am now going to go home and have something to eat. So I'm just going to say thanks for watching Otto's Garage. Big shout out as well to Stefan Baker, who I was having a bit of a chat with the other night. He's obviously a big fan of the garage, which is cool. So cheers, Steph. Keep watching, mate. And then the other thing I'm going to say is that stay safe. Let's all keep our fingers crossed for the current situation and hope we get a good outcome from it. So I'll see you on the next episode, and thanks for watching Otto's Garage.